So I'm not sure if you guys have noticed this trend, but recently a lot of music makers have been talking about the habits that help them achieve X goal in their career. And I love this idea and I've enjoyed watching other people's take on it. But there are some really important habits that I haven't heard many of them talk about in detail yet. So I want to make sure that you hear all of these and get a slightly different perspective. My background is a little different from those who have already shared, and if we don't know each other yet, then here's a quick 10-second version. Basically, I came up as a typical musician and recording engineer, but in my early 20s, I launched one of the first fully remote music production teams and did over $1 million in production fees. I made another video that talks about that. But then I used that business to start a media and digital products company called Make Pop Music with Austin Hull, and then leveraged that to start a boutique business consultancy for working class music producers called Dark Label Music. So despite the title of this video, I want to share habits that help me not just earn some money, because a lot of people in the music industry have done that once, but then they aren't around anymore. These are habits that help me maintain a full-time career, earning a healthy six-figure salary for over a decade, while being able to adapt and evolve as our industry changes. And it's been through a ton of changes since I started. I'm not sure if any of you watching this can relate, but I partied way too hard when I was a teenager and it caused a lot of trouble. And when I was about 14 or 15 years old, I can't remember the exact age because I was drinking all the time, but I was forced to go to these AA meetings. And I'll admit that I wasn't in a mindset to really listen to anything that anyone was saying, but they did have this core concept that really stuck with me. The entire concept was that you help others, but you're actually doing it to help yourself, because when you are helping others, it gets you out of your own head, even just for a minute, and you can string together days of sobriety that way and regain some purpose. That was the general approach. So I remember these old guys saying things like, it's necessary to ask for help because you're actually helping the other person by asking them for help. You aren't bothering them. Their life literally depends on it in this scenario. They almost preached against trying to do things on your own, because this was a place for people who had already tried everything on their own, but every time they did, things would get worse. And I carried this principle into building my music career. I realized that people generally aren't bothered by others asking them for help if they actually go implement that advice. It makes the other person feel good and that they made an impact because they got to help someone and it worked. People love that. And if you're trying to grow your music career right now and every single thing feels like it's a hard decision to make, then just understand that is the slowest way to do things. You can do it, it's just slower, because we are trying to make decisions ourselves that we aren't qualified to make because we don't have the experience or context to even make that decision yet. It's like trying to decide which wire to cut to disarm a bomb when you have no formal training on how to do that. Every decision you make has a 50% chance of causing a disaster. And those are not odds that I was personally okay with. So I made it a habit to ask people for help. If I could get a moment of their time, I would explain my situation. And then my favorite question to ask was, what would you do in my scenario if you were me? And then I would follow up with why, because I wasn't just looking for an answer. I wanted to learn how they think about things. This is a much better way to approach this versus just asking general questions like, how do I become a successful producer? Or what's the best business model? Or where do I start? Or things like that. It's just too vague of a question. And a lot of producers think that no one wants to help them, but that's not true. They're just asking bad questions, so they don't get good answers. And I was fortunate enough to get a lot of great guidance over the years from people ahead of me, which dramatically sped up my results in this business. But it's also understandable for you to think like, okay, how would I even meet these people and put myself in a position where they would be willing to help me? And here's where habit 2 comes into the picture. I want you to take a minute and ask yourself this question. And it's kind of a funny question, but I promise that there is a point. And be 100% honest. Throughout the day, how many times do you think about gasoline, like the kind that you put in your car? I'll give you a few seconds to think about it. For most of you, it probably doesn't consume your mind that often. It's a required resource for driving, but you most likely don't have an emotional attachment to gasoline, except for when you really need to drive somewhere and your car runs out of it. Then gasoline becomes all that you're thinking about. It does consume your mind in that moment. Now, replace gasoline with money. As a business advisor to producers, one of the biggest red flags I see is whenever someone says, I don't care about money. And I'm thinking like, well, yeah, I don't generally care about gasoline unless I really need to drive somewhere, but I don't have any of it. And I know what those producers generally mean is that money is not their motivation or mission for why they make music. And I agree. It was never mine either. However, saying you don't care about it just indicates to me that you probably don't understand it yet. And that's a massive disadvantage to anyone that wants to earn a living making music. Habit number 2 is that from day one as a working music professional, I cared about money. And I can admit that to all of you watching this with no guilty conscience about it. Even the first recording session I did back when I was in the 8th grade, I charged $20 for the session. Because if I needed to get from point A to point B in my music career, money can usually solve that problem, just like gasoline gets my car from point A to point B. Again, the gasoline or money isn't my motivation or mission. It's just the resource I need to get to my destination or goal. And when I was coming up, I valued having money more than I valued having time because I didn't really know what to do with my time yet. So it was essentially worthless to me. That's different today, but back then, that's what made sense to me. And I'll put this into a real life scenario for you that I see all the time. So a lot of producers will choose to not have a crappy day job and forfeit having money as a resource because they feel like having more time to focus on their music business is more valuable. But it's only valuable if you know what to do with that time. Time that is being wasted isn't that valuable. So again, for me, I didn't know what the best way was to use my time. So instead, I worked a job and then used the money I got from that job, even if it was just a little, to invest into knowing what to do with my time. An example of that was buying studio sessions at the biggest studio in my town and bringing projects that I would lose money on, by the way, just so I could have access to someone in my city that was doing the thing that I wanted to do. Being around someone like that normalized this career for me, which I'll talk about in habit number 3. And that mentor ended up changing the entire trajectory of my career. But I wouldn't have been able to put myself in that position if I didn't have the money to do it. I would have just been one of the million random kids asking him for stuff, but I wanted him to take me seriously. I'm not saying other people are going about this all wrong. You can do whatever you want. I'm just telling you that what made the most sense for me was doing it that way. And I know some of this may sound strange because all we hear about when it comes to music and money is that 1, it's hard to make money in music, and 2, people that do make money in music end up getting screwed all the time. So that brings me to the 3rd habit, which made it much easier for me to make consistent money in music and dramatically lowered my chances of getting screwed. So we tend to put doing music for a living on a pedestal. People refer to it as a dream job or living your dream, but I'm here to tell you that this is not a dream job. It's just a job. It's a cool job. I love it. And it's a privilege to do this for a living, but it is still just a job. You could apply the advice in this video to almost any career, creative or not. But when we treat something like it's a dream, which is technically not a reality by definition, it becomes this elusive thing that makes us think and act irrationally. Winning the lottery can be a dream. That's fine. That's based on luck, and it would be nice if it happens. But I made it a habit to never, ever think of my music career as trying to win the lottery. Because generally what happens when people do that is they end up relying heavily on outside people or circumstances to ensure their own success, and then they end up getting screwed because they were at a disadvantage. And I've had a few different careers in my music business journey, but the thing that they all had in common is that I built things that were in my control, more or less. If I didn't meet my income goals for the month, or if I lost an opportunity, then that was all on me, and I could go fix those problems. And I understand that there are many big opportunities you may want to go take in the music industry that you don't have control of, and it can feel like playing the lottery. And that's fine. I'm not telling you to ignore those opportunities, but you can still first build something you're in control of, and then everything else is just icing on the cake. You see this all the time. There are big producers with freelance clients, or they have a YouTube channel that they control and is making them money. Neither of those things prevent that producer from going and taking big swings in the industry. They can do both. And understand that there are opportunity costs when you invest time into something, because that is time you aren't investing into something else. But the world will always need superstars, hit songs, and music for sync placements. That's probably not going anywhere. I've seen producers I advise spend 15 years completely dedicated to one path. Maybe it's the major label path. And I appreciate their tenacity and work ethic. However, the thing that no one talks about is that the dream or promise they signed up for back when they started, by the time 15 years goes by, that dream or promise may not be the same reality anymore. Times change and things work differently. So they're in a bit of an existential crisis that could have just been avoided by spending a little time to build something that they control themselves, which is why they end up coming to us here at Dark Label. And if you're curious about what it is we actually do, then we just launched our new website that does a much better job of explaining that than our old one did. Go check it out if you're interested. And just a heads up, I have like 20 more of these habits I could share. So if you like this video, let me know in the comments and I'll make a few more like this one.